Cheating singles in Rex's world in California, when I first started, advanced cheating singles were called advanced watermarking procedure. And here's how he put it. He said, they can go anywhere they want to, as long as they don't go out of their way to get there. And you had to cock your head and say, in other words, they just have to go straight. If there's a point, they go over the point. If it's all water, they stay in the water. If it's a reentry, they reenter. That's the idea of advanced watermarking procedure. Now, this is beginning cheating singles. This isn't advanced. And cheating singles are something you're going to do the rest of your life with your dog. So it's something that never ends. They're built into more complex tests, but it starts with this. And typically my first one. Now let's go down to some of the pictures, because that's one of them, but that's not the first cheating single I did. Most of the first cheating singles I do are kind of a cut the corner. Now this one had more factors. When I say factors, it had more terrain. But just picture the temptation to run around the left side of the water is what they're going to do. And so many people just want to know, recall, move up, rethrow. I may do some of that, but I want to start to, when that dog goes down and starts to deviate left, I stop him on a whistle and I cast him into the water just like I did on the channel blinds. And I teach them, when I stop you on the whistle, I'm telling you, no, I don't want you to do that. And the hand signal tells you what I want you to do. Cast to the right, get in the water. That was cheating signal number one. Jump into cheating signal number two. Now, I like to do them in threes, typically. There's an overhead picture of that cheating signal. You could have done it from a couple different angles, but I like, for the most part, kind of a cut the corner. There's another one. We just moved around that same pond a little bit, had the same kind of idea, the temptation to run left, and I blow a whistle as close to the time that I think the dog intends to cheat. I don't let them run around the whole pond. I want to intervene at the point of decision. I want to identify or mark the behavior. Marking the behavior is drawing attention to the behavior in the beginning, in the initiation of the behavior, not after it's already happened. It works in reward markers. It works in other things. But when you are trying to communicate to the dog the language of don't do what you're trying to do, and the cast tells you what I want you to do, you need to do it at the point the dog starts to deviate to the left, not after he's run around the pond. This one had a bit of an angle entry. Now, we had just done one to the left, not very far from where we are now, number two. But number three was thrown down that narrow channel. And it was a narrow channel. He had a little bit of trouble with this one. He actually squared in and jumped on that right-hand point, got cast off, kind of refused to cast, got a little bit of a nick. We repeated it. He actually ended up popping once, and we worked through it. And did we perfect it that day? No. I don't necessarily have to feel I perfect it, but I want them to start to understand what it meant to being handled. They don't have to do it without being handled. I just ideally want them to start to understand the lesson of being handled. So in those three cheating singles, I had two corners and then kind of up the channel. And you'll see how narrow on that. Again, that's that same cheater you just saw from an overhead view. Now, day two, we did another cut the corner. There's a classic cut the corner cheater. Classic. They run at the gun, they miss the water. If you notice, I like to lay a bumper down at the perfect spot, a visible bumper, and then you throw to the bumper. So if the bumper bounces a little bit, there's still a white identifiable bumper at the perfect location. That's a good way to do it. Try to find those bumpers that are maybe a little harder, that don't bounce so much. Sometimes the most stressful part of this cheating single is a person throwing the cheating single to get it right. Now, this one, I didn't like this one, actually. It was another cut the corner, but it was kind of lungy, and it was hard to identify where the corner was. So that one, not so much. I think I did 4 this day, actually. Let's go to the next one. Sometimes you're going to like the ones you got. It just wasn't quite as clear, a little hard to identify what you were satisfied with. But there were 2 cut the corner ones. It's right up that channel. We did the corner. Now this one, there's a long entry channel. 6 and 7 really resembled each other. I did one in the right channel. I did one in the left channel. But in all those instances, when the dog runs, if he decides to run at the gun, he gets handled because he's not in the water. Those were the first 7 cheating singles I did with Joker. I did them in the course of 2 or 3 days. Now, you're going to want to do non-cheating marks, non-stressful therapeutic marks, because you're getting handled a fair amount. If you think you're overwhelming them, simplify them a little bit, give it a bit of a break, but they need to learn what it means to being handled. This isn't just about fearing land. So here was the question, and here's what kept me up that night. And I got up in the morning really thinking about it, because this gentleman, I think, was a pretty darn good dog trainer. I liked his attitude, but he said, Well, let me tell you how I do that cheating signal. That one exactly right there. I throw that mark, and when the dog runs around the corner, I recall them with multiple nicks. I make the shoreline, I create hot spots along the shore. There was a variation of repeating that, moving up, but more than anything, using no or recall with multiple nicks to create almost an underground fence scenario where the dog got pressure on the shoreline and pressure that were really kind of cold nicks. Not a lot of understanding, just like, oh, it's scary over there. Here's why I had trouble with that. Sunday morning was the last day, and I sat down and said, listen, guys, and I want to say this to you guys at home too. You can make them water. You can get them to get in the water and stay in the water. You can, but if you do it, will you make them fearful of land? Some of the greatest dogs, Lean Mack was one of them. Mike talks about it all the time. He went through a big stage in the middle of his life where when he looked at these scenarios, he saw fire around the edge of the water. He was fearful of land. So it created a tremendous amount of anxiety about the whole dilemma that dog was facing. I don't want them to be a victim of pressure. I don't want them to think that a bolt of lightning hit them out of nowhere when they ran around the shore. I want to teach them, sit on a whistle, take a cast. I'm going to show you the right way, and I'm going to correct you if you don't accept my handle. I want them to understand that they are in control of corrections. They are not simply a victim of random cold burns or things like that. It is so important. You can speed your way through this with old school style boogeymen, cold burns, things like that make them afraid of land. But there's a tremendous amount of baggage that goes along with that and mistrust. My typical scenario is when that dog goes down, and if you look at the perfect line to that bird, and he's going at that right-hand clump right at the deal, and he gets just a little bit across the road, and he's starting to shoulder a little left. And the first time his momentum shifts left towards that gun, I stop him. And I go beep, and I don't say no, because the whistle's saying no. And I'll give them a pretty literal cast at right angle back at that point. And in some instances, the dog starts that way and deviates again. Now I whistle and I may nick. Now, I may have to simplify with more exaggerated casts, but in a perfect world, I don't want them to dedestinate and think they're not supposed to go for it and go way right. I want them to start to understand the language of being handled en route to a mark retrieve and what it means to get in the water, get back in the water, teach them to get out of the water if necessary, and what all that language, because all of those casts, all of that you're going to use for the remainder of these dogs' lives. Get in, get back in, stay in, and get out, or get close, or all of those things. Now you're not only teaching the dog the rules of the water, you're teaching him the language that you're going to use for the next 8 to 10 years of this dog's life. He's going to trust you. You're going to be fair. You're going to worry about attitude. And you're going to have a dog that does disciplined behavior without acting like they're being disciplined. They're not fearful of consequences. They have a respect of consequences. They know you're the boss, but if you've done your homework, you've exposed them and taught them how to handle and deal with pressure and not be overreactive and find that sweet spot that changes behavior but doesn't overwhelm them. In other words, too little, they just tolerate. Too much, they get overwhelmed. Then you find that zone. Now you've got the perfect beginning to a great career. And that's what Bomb-Proof Basics does. When it's done right, it's absolutely a joy to see. And I've witnessed 6 or 7 dogs in the last year. Are all of them going to be great? No, but they've got the beginnings. They've got the tools to be great. Close to 40 years ago, I made my first winter trip with Mike Lardy to Enhandrum Retrievers, and we had 11 Basics dogs, and I think 6 or 7 of those became field champions. And we started with this. It worked then, and it works now. Good stuff. Do your homework, study it, do it right. Don't use fear. Don't use hot spots. Explain the rules. You're going to get the best out of it, and you're going to be a better trainer, and you're going to have a deeper bond with your dog.